I think we can all agree that the current chaotic events in France are violent riots, regardless of how the country slipped into chaos and all the justifications for and against the rioters' acts. Nevertheless, there is something which always catches my attention after every security event in Europe, and that is how polarized the discussion gets, as one part puts all the blame on the migrants and refugees, and the other side insists unlimited migration has nothing to do with the instability, warning instead of the rise of the far right groups. As a Syrian living in Germany, I'm sick and tired of being used as a punch bowl for political scores from both sides. The left says refugees are welcome, and the right says they want to expel them all. How about addressing the root causes of the influx of refugees in Europe, which was infiltrated by Islamists and radicals who would never integrate into Western societies? Let us check the timeline of the significant waves of refugees to Europe in the past decades. In 2011, the foolish leaders of Europe led a coalition of NATO states against Libya, bombed the country to ashes, supported the Islamists to fight against Gaddafi, and eventually they murdered the leader of the North African country, who warned Europe 10 days before the NATO invasion in March 2011 that Libya plays an important role in the security of the Mediterranean and that if he is removed by the NATO backed Islamists, millions will march from Africa to France and Italy. But the media told us Gaddafi is bluffing and he is insane for stating the obvious. Now tell me, who was correct and who was foolish? The same thing happened in the Middle East. After destroying Iraq and killing Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, the criminal cabal in Washington, London, and in some European countries came after Syria's Bashar al Assad and they triggered a proxy war which created an unprecedented refugee crisis 5 million refugees and 7 million internally displaced people. There are millions more waiting for the right opportunity to escape to Europe too. What drives me crazy is that Western politicians either do not learn from their mistakes or they simply do not care. These experiences have shown that interventionist and hawkish policies do not benefit anyone, and instead of joining the efforts of China and Russia in stabilizing the region, the US and the EU are increasingly imposing more illegal sanctions on the Syrian people and pushing them below the poverty line and desperation. So, who is creating the migration refugee crisis here? To the Western left, I say, instead of helping the refugees after they arrive in your country, help them stay in their home countries by simply not destroying their livelihoods and investing in stability and job opportunities. And to the Western right, I say, instead of blaming the refugees for all your problems, understand that nobody wants to leave everything behind and risk his life to arrive in Europe unless the conditions that you politicians created in their countries are unbearable. Personally, I haven't heard of any Syrian refugees in Europe before the US led regime change war against Damascus in 2011. Have you?
Where did the refugees come from? I don't mean did they come from Syria or Afghanistan, that we know. But why did they come? They came because of war. Where did the war come from? From my country, from the CIA, which first started to overthrow the Afghan government back in 1979. The U.S. has been involved in Afghanistan in war, both covert and overt, for nearly 40 years. Iraq, absolutely against international law, of course, often called the most dreadful foreign policy decision in modern times, an absolutely unprovoked war, killed hundreds of thousands, displaced millions, created disaster, blowback, and refugees. Where was Europe's foreign policy? I kept looking. Is there a foreign policy? I even took out my microscope. I couldn't even find a microscopic foreign policy because there's no foreign policy to speak of. So the idea that the only policy is to debate should we accept refugees or not is not right. The real policy is stop the wars that are producing them.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
Chers compatriotes, depuis plusieurs jours s'est instauré dans le pays un état de désordre endémique, de violence et de destruction dont les images et les échos sont glaçants de brutalité. Dans une république qui se respecte, aucun événement, même dramatique, aucune raison, même émotionnelle, ne peut légitimer une anarchie qui veut s'installer. Les atteintes aux personnes et aux biens, les attaques contre les policiers et les pompiers, les mises à sac de mairies, les incendies d'écoles ou les pillages de magasins. Les politiques ou les syndicats politisés qui ont pris la responsabilité d'exonérer moralement ces agissements criminels sont d'eux-mêmes sortis du champ républicain. Ils en porteront une responsabilité indélébile devant la nation et l'histoire, même lorsqu'ils seront débordés par le mouvement de violence insensé qu'ils ont encouragé, voire initié. J'appelle tous les citoyens à se défier de ces forces antirépublicaines et extrémistes qui, par leurs appels indirects à la sécession et leur connivence avec la violence, conduisent le pays sur les chemins terribles du désordre. Ces violences récurrentes depuis des années sont désormais à des niveaux jamais atteints et touchent maintenant tout type de communes, de la plus petite jusqu'au centre des grandes villes, y compris le cœur de la capitale. Ces événements épouvantables ramènent nos dirigeants à la réalité, que l'ivresse d'un pouvoir solitaire et de folles constructions idéologiques, notamment en matière d'immigration et de laxisme judiciaire, leur avaient fait perdre de vue. La prospérité d'un peuple, l'ordre et la paix civile, comme la cohésion sociale, ne relèvent pas d'une grâce immanente, mais pour toute nation d'une attention de tous les instants, d'un combat de tous les jours. Notre pays, lui, entre dans une période d'incertitude et d'inquiétude. Comme responsable de la première force d'opposition, j'entends m'en tenir à la ligne de conduite qui est la nôtre, de ne rien faire, qui puisse empêcher ou entraver l'action des autorités légitimes qui ont en charge l'ordre public. J'apporte tout mon soutien à l'ensemble des forces de sécurité déployées pour faire cesser ces émeutes. De mon côté, j'appelle à la cessation des violences, soit par l'intervention spontanée, comme ces parents admirables de courage et de civisme qui vont chercher leurs enfants entraînés dans des folies destructrices, soit, dès que cela est nécessaire, par la force légitime de la loi et de la justice. Face à des hordes prises d'une rage destructrice, une rage sans limite, il n'y a pas d'autre solution immédiate que le retour à l'ordre républicain par le biais de couvre-feu sectoriel et, si la situation devait perdurer ou s'aggraver, par la déclaration de l'état d'urgence. Il est essentiel que toutes les forces de l'État, souvent dispersées à l'extérieur ou dans des actions subalternes, se concentrent sur la situation intérieure d'un pays qui, dans toute son histoire, a su vaincre les forces d'asservissement. D'ores et déjà, comme responsable de la première force politique d'opposition, je demande au président de la République de recevoir sans plus attendre les formations représentées à l'Assemblée nationale pour révoquer la situation grave du pays et les initiatives que la République doit engager pour la sauvegarde de la liberté et de la sécurité publique.